Jamie, we've been saying for a while that we need something to help rejuvenate cinema. We need something away from reboots and remakes. We need something fresh and not the same superhero movie repackaged every 16 months. We need new ideas that inspire like everything everywhere all at once.
Is this leading to you being upset that the biggest piece of movie news this week were Shrek 5, Minions 3, and a trailer for Captain America 4?
You know, this is exactly why we went on hiatus. But fuck it. We're here already, and today we're going to complain a lot. Roll the intro. Hello and welcome back to 21st Century Cinema. It's the podcast about film and the film industry. It has been a long 14 months away, friends, but we are back. Sort of. I'm going to get to that later, but let's get us started for today. I'm one of your hosts, Joseph Delavecchia, and joining me today is my original co-host who started it all, the mice grandmother herself, and also now officially my sister-in-law. It's Jamie Carvello. Jamie, hi.
Hello, yes, I am now the proud grandmother of about 14 baby mice. Yes.
I mentioned
Hello.
the mice and my wedding, and you went to the mice first.
Well, yeah, that's more recent and more relevant to me.
Okay, fair.
I'm joking, but the wedding was beautiful and lovely, and I was honored to be a part of it, and now you are officially my brother-in-law, which makes referring to you much easier than, like, trying to say our relation before. Anyways.
My sister's boyfriend / fiance, who I started a podcast with, and yeah. Also joining us today is we have a guest with us. He is the co-owner of Stone Silo Counseling and Wellness in Waterloo and Listowel, Ontario. He's a movie buff by choice, and he also incorrectly believes that The Dark Knight is the best Batman movie ever made. Please welcome to our show our guest, Ezra Branderhorst. Ezra, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, interesting little dig in there about The Dark Knight, but we'll let it go for now. Well,
I love The Dark Knight. It's the second best Batman movie ever made.
And what's number one?
The Batman.
Gotcha.
The Batman. Yeah, we have a whole review for The Batman actually on this show. I think it's one of our longest episodes. I think it's almost 3 hours long. It's almost as long as the movie itself. We had guests from another podcast, Rob and Andrew, from How to Survive the Modern World, or Gen X is Not a Fashion Statement. Very long Fall Out Boy title podcast name. But they came on and they chatted. I honestly don't remember if it was me and Jamie or me and Noah, but yeah, our friend Noah Shepard is not with us today, sadly, everyone, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit before we get into the episode. So TFCC has been on hiatus for 14 months. I moved to one end of the country, left Jamie in the middle of the country, and Noah is on the other end of the country. So our schedules are currently impossible to coordinate. For example, when I wake up at 5 a.m. for work in the morning, it's already 9:30 a.m. for Noah. By the time I'm off work, have time to unwind, eat food, it's usually 4:30, 5 o'clock, which is 9 to 9:30 p.m. for Noah in Newfoundland. Plus, Jamie has a band that plays on nights and weekends, so those are out the window. But we're here for a special summer episode. So while TFCC will return as a monthly podcast sometime late next year, we are going to be doing 4 bonus episodes across that year to still just kind of keep you guys entertained and remind you that we still exist. So we have the first one coming out now in summer of 2024. We're going to have an episode this fall, which will be me and Noah and a guest. We're going to have one in winter of 2025, which hopefully we'll have all 3 hosts, but we'll see what happens. And then also one in spring of 2025. We're always going to have 3 hosts on the panel, but sometimes it might be a guest or 2 guests. We'll see what happens. But
and to be fair, we were supposed to have an episode in person for the first time ever with all 3 of us together. But there was a little bump in the road there.
Yeah, so we were going, as we mentioned earlier, I got married. Jamie and I are now officially related. And in this, Ezra, we'll tell you this story. You're new to the show. So with all 3 hosts, we've never all been in the same place at the same time, except for my wedding. That was the big exciting thing and Noah was coming in a week early. We were going to get together and we were going to record an episode. And because it was for the wedding, we were going to do wedding movies. And so everybody picked a wedding movie to watch for us to do. I picked Table 19. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I have.
Jamie, which one did you pick, Jamie?
I picked The Farewell and Palm Springs, yeah.
Palm Springs, yeah. And Noah picked Ready or Not. And so we go and we watch these movies. And then we're getting ready to record this episode, and Noah's like, oh, I didn't watch the movie recently, but I've seen it before when he was talking to me. And I was like, okay, so you've seen Table 19 before. He's like, no, 27 dresses. Like, 27 dresses. And I was like, yeah, wasn't I supposed to watch 27 dresses? I'm like, no, that was the rom-com episode a year ago. So Noah watched the completely wrong movie and we weren't able to record our episode. And now he's also coincidentally not here today. So I'm not saying we suspended him, but no, we didn't.
I mean, to be honest, it was so hectic. We were going to record like the day before the wedding.
We were going to record the day before the wedding.
Which
It was a
like,
hectic week.
Which was crazy. There was too much going on. So
I still believe we could have done it. I don't
know. But
it's like Ezra said, we're just talking. We're just talking here.
I suppose so.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. All right. Housekeeping aside, today we're going to talk about Disney. Now, while Disney probably fills you with warm and exciting childhood memories, makes you think of magic in the recent years, it has felt like the magic has died. The corporate entity is outdated and behind the times on so many social situations. Their movies have not been up to par compared to their previous work. Their properties are bland, uninteresting, and alienating fans. And between Disney Plus and the parks, they're losing money at an alarming rate. So today we're going to dive into a lot of different issues Disney is having, our thoughts, and also how we think they should fix it.
To get started, we want to help Ezra feel as comfortable as possible because this is his first time doing a podcast. So Ezra, I want to ask you a Disney-related question. To get started, we'll start with something you might be an expert in. So the Disney movie Inside Out is a movie about growing up, discovering and understanding your emotions, and the magic of childhood and imagination. And Joe, like everything else, hates and despises it. So as a therapist who deals with a lot of these subjects and a movie lover, Ezra, can you once and for all answer our most asked question? What is wrong with Joe?
It's not even a joke, Ezra. That or a variation of that is our most asked question for the last 5 years.
Well, I'll kind of maybe reword the question. What's wrong with Joe? Maybe the question is what happened to Joe? To kind of lead him into this experience. Inside Out, and I've been hearing a lot about the second film, which I have not seen yet, but Inside Out, I just think has really helped a lot of people because we live in this kind of world now where mental health, I think, is a little bit there's more awareness about it. It's always been here, obviously, but I think there's just more acknowledgement and more it's more in the spotlight of like, okay, yeah, there's deeper things going on that maybe people could benefit from getting some help in. So Inside Out just does such a great job, and this is why I give Pixar a lot of credit with, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, but they just do such a good job at providing a pretty simple story. Like essentially Riley is just having a tough time with the move from Minnesota to San Francisco. And, just through the eyes of her and everything kind of going on, it's just this really fun, creative way of kind of just expressing, hey, what's going on for her. And what I really like about it too is that a big part of therapy that at least I really try to do is help kind of validate and also like normalize what's going on for someone. So for example, if I'm working with someone through the eyes of anxiety, which is a lot about worry, which I know Inside Out 2 has a character now for, but behaviors and thoughts and feelings, it all makes sense when you see it through the eyes of anxiety or something like that. So I think Inside Out does such a good job of doing that. Now going back to Joe and whatever his issue is, I think yeah, like right, like what happened to the guy or whatever it is. But Joe, I'm curious, like what about this movie and again, I love the wording, right? Such big emotions of hate, despise. Yeah, I'm sure we could do a whole podcast just about this, but what about this movie are you not a big fan of?
So I have a few issues with the movie. My first issue with the movie was that I did not think it was this fun, creative idea. I didn't vibe with the concept of like the emotions in your head and everything. I'm like, you're opening the door to too many questions and complexities, honestly, and just trying to dumb it down and make it simple. I'm like, it's more complex than that. So I didn't think the movie was like did a good job of trying to convey like how your emotions all work and everything like that. I wasn't a big fan of that. I thought the whole like, oh, like sadness is always sad and joy is always happy. Like, so they're not going to get like they're going to alienate each other and then end up like outside of the brain or the the big control room, like you know, like I don't know, it's like it's so obvious and simple. And I've said this before, and Jamie's like, well, it's for kids, Joe. And I'm like, it doesn't matter to me. Movies can be for kids but still be intelligent. And I just feel like this was just really trying to dumb down, like, when you're happy, you're happy. When you're sad, you're sad. I wasn't big on it. I didn't find the movie entertaining, and I'm sorry, but I think Bing Bong is an annoying character. I did not feel anything when he died. I didn't think there was enough time or build up for that character to feel something emotional, and everyone tells me that I'm dead inside because of it.
Have you ever heard or seen sorry, not a color wheel, an emotion wheel before, Joe?
Yes, I've seen an emotion wheel.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
No, I don't, but I really am wondering.
So for anyone out there, you know, whenever typically you'll see this in therapy, whatever it is, like when we talk about emotional regulation, a big thing is talking about emotions, obviously. And sometimes people have a hard time almost like articulating exactly what they're feeling. So for example, I'm not feeling angry, but maybe I'm feeling more like frustrated. Maybe frustrated is the better word. But sometimes people don't necessarily have that vocabulary in their head. And so emotions wheel is designed to just really help someone kind of tease all this stuff out. If you were to ever like Google an emotions wheel, you'll see that it looks kind of like a color wheel from art class. And at the very center of this wheel is kind of what we call like the most basic emotions. And then it spreads out from there. So the very center of the emotions wheel are the characters from Inside Out. So you have anger, you have joy, you have sadness, you have disgust, um, fear. So that's, in my opinion, this is why these are the characters, especially at the age that Riley is, because most children at that age have these kind of more basic emotions. It isn't until they kind of get older that the vocabulary kind of begins. Now, hey, Joe, to give credit to you, you're right. As you know, however old you are, 16, 18-year-old that you are, you know, yeah, you probably have way more emotions, and it probably isn't that simple to you. But I would say that Pixar does a good job, again, because we're seeing it through the eyes of this child. And it wouldn't surprise me if there's ever an Inside Out 3, 4. I hope they don't like butcher it, but hey, but you could, because there's going to be all these more emotions and stuff like that as well. And yeah, you know what, Bing Bong, fair enough, right? Like every, and I'm sure we'll talk about this too, but like every Disney and Pixar, they always need to have some kind of little sidekick thing. But you know what? Like something that really stood out to me. So talking about Bing Bong, for example, so you talked that there isn't much character development with him, and maybe you're right. But there is that very kind of what I would call like a really standout scene in that movie where Bing Bong's wagon gets thrown into the pit, right? Where things are forgotten. And he's crying and stuff like that, right? And he's really, really upset. And here's Joy, who represents what one would say like toxic positivity, where it's just constantly like, oh, it's fine, it's good, trying to make him laugh, just wasn't having it. And then sadness comes in, and sadness has this ability of connecting with people. And this is where things like empathy can come into play, because empathy is all about connection and stuff like that. So I think that Inside Out, again, you're right. Is it made for kids? Maybe, but I do also think that as adults, and I've heard this a lot about the second movie as well, I think from what I've been hearing that a lot of adults can relate to it too, because especially for things like anxiety, every single one of us on the planet has anxiety. Whether we actually struggle with it as much as maybe other people do, that's obviously different for everyone. But yeah, because I think, you know, when people come into therapy, I think a lot of people, the way I always think about it is that we have relationships with like our emotions. And so, for example, if I'm working with someone through depression, for example, a lot of people will see the emotion of sadness as being bad. I don't want to feel this way. It sucks. And unfortunately, as a result, we just summarize all of sadness to be bad, where that's obviously not the case. And I think Inside Out does a really good job at explaining that it's okay to be sad. And it also can be really helpful and appropriate for some things, right? Like, so for example, yeah, like if my dog ever dies, I'm going to be a wreck, and maybe that's okay, because it's not out of the sadness. It also comes out of like love and stuff like that too. So Yeah, and again, it's Pixar, right? And so they're trying to find, I think, this creative idea that makes it you're taking a very complicated system where, again, people with PhDs are doing this as their career, and you're really just trying to simplify it and give a consistent message to the general audiences where, again, they have to assume that no one really knows anything about emotions or how they work or whatever. So that's my sermon on that.
It was
Any
very
thoughts, Joe?
profound. It was very profound, and I see your points. I don't like in my mind though too. I'm like, well, if it's such like a complex thing that people in PhDs are working on, why are we making a kids movie about it? Is could something I could throw at you? But one thing that I do want your opinion on is just because the way you've talked about it and everything, and how like it can be a good learning lesson for kids. One of my other biggest things for Inside Out is that I feel like it takes away a lot about agency. Like a lot of Disney movies have always been about like, you can do this, you can do anything. Set your mind, set your heart to it. We're all capable of something. Agency has been a really big theme, especially in earlier Disney movies. Mulan is a great example of that. But this movie makes it look like our emotions control everything. Like everything is based off of emotion. And sometimes we do act emotionally in real life and we make decisions emotionally. But there's also like many times where we make decisions logically. And there really isn't something to represent that or that free agency. Like it almost feels like, like Riley isn't Riley. Riley is joy, anger, sadness, and disgust. Fear.
So to answer your first point about like why make a kids movie about something so complex, I think what really Disney is trying to do and Pixar is I think we're shifting away from like the hero complex with like whatever thing. And I think we're trying to make something very relatable that a lot of people experience, but not enough people talk about. And so I think this is kind of like a creative art avenue or expression to start conversations. Because I know, for example, with Inside Out, a lot of therapists like packages have been made ever since Inside Out. And again, it's not here to say that it's like 1,000% accurate, but it certainly is pointing in the right direction of where maybe conversations need to go on. Now, talking about the emotions, and this is I'm if you had 5 therapists in this podcast right now, but everyone had a different opinion. I specialize in a type of therapy called cognitive behavior therapy, which essentially talks about how our thoughts, so the cognitive, our thoughts drastically impact how we feel and what we end up doing. So, for example, if I'm driving and someone cuts me off, the thought I'm having is, what an a-hole, like they did this on purpose. They don't care about anyone's safety. So I'm feeling frustrated. Like these are the emotions, right? I'm angry. I'm anxious. I'm scared. All that kind of stuff. So what do I end up doing? I am screaming at them. I'm tailgating them. I'm throwing my milkshake at them. That kind of stuff. And so, to go off your point, is it the emotions driving it? Depending who you're talking to or maybe what they specialize in, some people would say yes. From the lens of cognitive behavior therapy, it's actually that there's thoughts that lead us to feel, which leads us to do. And you actually see a glimpse of this in Inside Out. For example, like when the characters are talking, like when the emotions are talking, one could argue that those are thoughts. So for example, on Riley's first day of school, fear comes out with a whole list of all these like scenarios that could happen, like being called out by the teacher. And so these are all the thoughts. And one could argue that that's anxiety, that we're worried about what could happen and all this stuff. And yeah, again, is that the emotion driving it, or is that really the thoughts driving it? And that's such a debatable thing. But Joe, to go to your point, there's so many different kinds of therapy about this, even something called internal family systems, which talks about basically how me as a person, I have many parts. And these parts, basically, you're right, they're kind of building blocks that make me me. And there's no such thing as a good or a bad part. But it's really about identifying what parts are coming out right now. So for example, I have a part that's like about social justice. I have a part that's all about logic, like thinking and analyzing. I have a part that's very reflective, stuff like that. So again, so many, and this is why mental health is such a wide array of things that, yeah, so many paths to get to where people want to go. But essentially, again, to answer your question, one could argue that we are the sum of our parts. So whether you want to see that from an emotions lens or not, Yeah, I don't know if that was clear as mud or not, but hopefully that kind of somewhat makes sense.
The reason why we called this segment the rabbit hole of the episode. Yeah, I mean, looking at like you're looking at it from a very like therapist lens and everything, you know. So like you said, there's definitely different perspectives to it, and yeah, I can't speak to too much of the therapist stuff because I don't have the knowledge that you do on all those things. I just even so, like I can see the value in what you're saying. I still don't like the movie. The end of the day, I still don't like the movie, but I can at least appreciate the value and that it has done good things for the mental health world, especially when it comes to children.
Sure. And then, hey, just to be fair to what you're saying, would I say to like a parent, well, hey, just have your kids see Inside Out, then they're good to go? No. I would not. You know, it might be a good starting point. It might be helpful in some ways, but yeah, no, there's certainly more to be done than just this film.
Jamie, do you have any hot takes on Inside Out you want to share?
No, I thought it was enjoyable and fun. That's it. That's not a hot take. That's like the most baseline, like average. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Moving on, then we're gonna get fully into Disney now. Ezra, I think you're pretty warmed up there. You got yourself on a few tangents. So let's look back on Disney a little bit. Disney was on top of the world before. You know, Marvel was a very lucrative property. They had built a 10-year story that came to a close with what some, not me, would describe as an epic and fulfilling conclusion with Endgame.
And then meanwhile, at that time, they'd also acquired Star Wars. And while the sequel films are still divisive, even today, they made a lot of money. And the franchise seemed to be headed in a better direction with The Mandalorian and follow-up shows. Now, a few years after launching their streaming service, their overall quality is down. Their ideas are just recycled, and their content is causing more division online than ever. Even their 100-year anniversary musical, Wish, was a huge flop and was met with high criticism. So where did it all go wrong, and what can be done to fix it?
This is the part now where we have a few questions we prepared, guys, that we're just gonna kind of express our dismay. So first off, Ezra and Jamie, how do we feel about Disney's quality in recent years when it comes to animation? Let's look at the last 5-6 years. So let's look at like Frozen 2 beyond. So we're looking at Frozen 2, Turning Red, Encanto, Wish, and if we want to count Pixar, we also have Elemental in there, and now Inside Out 2. How do we feel about Disney's quality in recent years?
Go ahead, Jamie. You start.
So in the actual animation, you mean, or like in the movies?
In both, like their animated
Okay.
stuff. Like we can talk about the animation, we can talk about the movies. Like
I feel like they're falling behind in terms of actual animation, and then the things they do that do stick out or are quality feel like they're trying to mimic or replicate what other studios and other movies have done. Like in recent years, the stuff that has had the most interesting and innovative animation has been like, well, I guess Into the Spider-Verse, but it wasn't really done by Pixar, or like Disney Studios weren't the ones
no, that's
who were behind
all
that.
Sony.
Yeah, as well as like the Puss in Boots movie. That's random, but the animation was really cool. It was different, and I would really like to see animation go down that route. And it feels like Disney is just so behind that animation won't go that way. Because they tried to replicate it, especially with Wish. It looked like they were trying to get that kind of like different frame rate, like comic book-esque outlined, but it was all like it was very obvious that it was just a 3D rendering that they then put weird like rotoscope lines around. I don't know, it felt like a lame attempt to recreate what these other studios have done.
And another movie that also like did the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated film that came out this past summer, that used a really nice unique form of animation too. And then they're doing a 2D version of that for a show now on Paramount Plus. So to your point, like animation is changing and evolving, and there's like this beautiful animation. People really, really like the what if animation that's used in Marvel. I know we're going to talk about Marvel in a bit, but people really like what ifs animation, the cell shading animation, which is a little similar to Wish, not entirely, but kind of those points you were talking about. And I think that cell shading doesn't really look that great and everything, but they're currently using it. This is a separate thing. DC is using it for their new Watchmen animated movie.
Oh.
And anyone who's ever listened to the show before, who's ever met me, knows that I live and breathe Watchmen as like my one biggest thing. And the problem is that Watchmen was so big. One of its main reasons was the way it was drawn. Dave Gibbons came up with a custom panel structure that kind of revolutionized comics in the 80s with it. The art was extremely breathtaking. There is so much like hidden details in that artwork. Very powerful. And instead of adapting a similar art style, they've gone with cell shading so it looks more like Marvel's What If.
Yeah, I feel like a big thing with Disney and Pixar is they do kind of have to, or they act like they have to play it safe. And that's
Mhm.
why I think they have so many reboots and spin-offs, because they know they will make money. They know they will get like the crowd. And same with these animations, like if they use the same animation style from the first version of this movie or from their other recent movies, they know that it works, so they're not going to take risks that, I mean, not that Sony is a smaller studio, but it is compared to Disney.
Yeah, compared to
Um,
Disney, everything's smaller.
and they have just such a huge team of animators, and I feel like the animators kind of notoriously aren't treated right, as well as even creative directors come from a place of business and often not from artistic backgrounds. So they
Animation
kind
is
of,
not unionized, so yeah, they have it
yeah,
really rough.
so they lack the like creative drive to really be innovative, and they're just kind of, okay, maybe their animation is better than it was 10 years ago, but it's the same style. They won't take risks or do anything that creatively diverges from the path they're on. So I feel like they're bound to just like get worse and get further behind in terms of actual animation.
And I'd also argue too that now like the other shoe has dropped. Like Wish and Elemental did not make any
Yeah.
money whatsoever. Like they didn't make money. In terms of like sequels or in-universe stuff, the Marvels did not make any money. Like a lot of everything that Disney has had up like Inside Out 2 is their first box office success in over a year. Like
Yeah.
in terms of film and then also TV too, we know Disney Plus is losing money and that shareholders are worried. Like, so we're looking at this as like, has the other shoe dropped now? Like, do they have to change? We've seen in their television division and in the Marvel division, they've made changes. They haven't really made any changes with Star Wars, which we'll get into as well. But, and then in Disney animation, we don't really know where that's going next, but we know
Yeah.
that they took Luca, their next film, and they delayed it by over 2 years.
Crazy. I think like if anything, it's showing that because they aren't taking risks, the sequels and remakes are the only things that will work. Because there's nothing to draw people into seeing like Wish or Elemental. There's nothing really special about that. But if they're using those techniques for a movie that people had loved previously, then there is a draw. That like the things that do well, Inside Out 2 did well because it's the same characters and concepts that people really loved before. And this summer I'm working with a lot of kids, and what's interesting, all of their favorite TV shows are TV shows based off of like old good movies. Like I guess there's a Little Mermaid TV show, and that's a lot of their favorites. Even though there might be other really good TV shows that Disney's putting out, or at least of the same quality, because there's nothing special about it, they're going to go for the ones that have the characters that they love and that are already established in pop culture. Like I don't think Disney is really able to establish any new pop culture characters. You even see like from Encanto, like if they try to have those characters in Disney World, they're not as popular as like the classic princesses or
Mhm.
even other Pixar characters from like 10, 15 years ago. So I feel like they aren't willing to put the money into creating these new iconic characters and doing something really different and interesting, because there's the risk that it doesn't land, and they've seen that if they don't go all in, it doesn't land. So they may as well go like half in on a remake, because they are still going to make money on merchandising and they already have some sort of crowd that's interested.
And while Luca is like their next original film, the two films following that up that they've announced are Frozen 3 and Zootopia 2.
Do you mean like Luca 2?
No, Luca, like the first Luca. Oh, sorry,
What do
not
you
Luca, Elio. Not
Okay,
Luca,
I was gonna say
Elio. I'm
Luca came
sorry.
out like 4 years ago
Yeah,
or
the movie
something.
that was
Okay.
delayed 2 years is Elio, and it's coming out. Sorry, that's my spoke right
Okay.
there. Yeah. Ezra, how do you feel?
Yeah, I'm I don't disagree with anything that's being said. It's just you can just tell, right? You can just tell that the quality has gone down. Regarding the animation itself, what was talked about before, like, yeah, the biggest movie that comes to my mind when I think about the animation was Moana, with the water and everything like that. Like I was like, wow, like that looks amazing. And I think sometimes what also happens is like, sometimes the focus is so much on one and not the other. So you get like this awesome animation, but then you get this really crap story or whatever, and it just kind of falls flat. Um, And I also agree too about how we just keep reusing the same stuff. And Disney's not the only one that does this, by the way. Like what just came out? Despicable Me 4 or something like
Yeah,
that.
and they
Like
announced Minions 3 this week.
that's right. That's right. So, you know, obviously it's not just Disney kind of going through this. But you're right. Like there seems to be this push about just making some kind of money. I'd rather get some, like some is better than nothing. And you know, and this conversation actually reminds me a little bit like back in May, Disney CEO like Bob Iger, whatever, however way you say
Iger,
his last
yeah.
name. You know, he even acknowledged, right, that like they have been focusing way too much on quantity over quality. Um, and I know we're going to get into this a little bit later about like, you know, how Disney has changed and everything like that, you know, from like, you know, the days of, yeah, like the Little Mermaid and Aladdin to, you know, Encanto. But yeah, it just seems like it's rare to get original thought out there, which is why I think Inside Out was so popular. But if you haven't noticed, since Inside Out, there has been what I would call movies that are trying to be like that. I would say movies like Elemental, for example. Um, and I think people are not being fooled by that. It just kind of feels like another version of that. Um,
Recycling.
yeah, recycling. And like, hey, like, you know what? Is the music catchy? Sure. You know what I mean? But like, it just seems like something is being lost. And I do think as well, that I think Disney is really trying hard to modernize itself. And I think the messaging in movies and other projects that they have is really trying to do that. So that's also where I think that people are noticing a shift, which is like, yeah, you don't usually get the whole, you know, damsel in distress needs a man kind of a thing going on here anymore. Now it seems to be a lot more like about empowerment or family. Like Encanto is all about family. It also talks about like generational trauma. So it's really trying to kind of take on these um, kind of like real life issues and really trying to make more awareness about them, which is admirable. You know, like there's nothing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that I don't know what the word is. I just think it's kind of being something's being lost, I think. And I think, well, obviously the numbers are saying it for itself. Um, People are noticing. And just throwing this other little curveball in there too. I don't think COVID and streaming have helped in this cause at all. Because I think now you don't get the whole like every couple of years there's a Disney movie and everyone goes to the theater to go see it. Now you're getting every 6 months something coming out and you can stream it right away. And right. So I just yeah, I would imagine that there's many different reasons of why quality seems to be going down as of
We have
late.
talked about streaming a lot on this show, Ezra. It's kind of funny. We haven't been like on the show for 14 months, so it's kind of. But like, I don't know if Jamie, you noticed this, but everyone on Twitter recently started really complaining that streaming has become like cable. I'm like, wow, if
Yeah.
only people listened to 21st Century Cinema 5 years ago when we talked about this in season 1.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like Netflix is still struggling. And we talked about this. I think that was season 2. Like we've been talking about streaming for years and there are obvious problems in that people didn't really realize until now it's too late, but something's
Yeah.
going to take, it's like, it's going to keep changing no matter what. I really love this line. If anybody knows Christian Borle, he's a big musical theater guy on Broadway. He was in a season of Smash and in his like big hit song, he makes it's taking place back in Maryland. It's about Marilyn Monroe, and so it's taking place back in that time period. And he makes a comment about, and I think cable just won't last. And he's a studio executive. He's like, I think cable just won't last. And it's what people thought about streaming. And you know, and cable eventually starts to die out. It still exists, but it's not what it once was. Streaming is not what it once was. Streaming has had a faster turnaround time because of just A, hard economic times, but B, people don't want to pay for it. But I do just want to kind of get back on track here. And you guys each kind of talked about like those sequels and things like really being like where people are going. And Ezra, you brought up Moana, which makes me think of this point that I want to bring up that I think really helps like justify what both of you are saying about like where they think the money is and they're trying to make money. Moana 2 is coming out this year. Are you guys familiar with the story about like the production of Moana 2? of what like it's already has
No.
it's already a crazy drama.
No.
So Moana was a crazy commercial success, and Disney wanted. I was gonna say Jamie wanted to cash in. Disney wanted to cash in on that, of course. So they decided that with Disney Plus, they were gonna make a Moana TV show. And one of the great things about the TV show was that it was just gonna be like a TV show on Disney Plus that just kids would watch. So you didn't need Dwayne Johnson or I don't remember her name properly, but the girl who voices Moana, who's
it's
also
Ollie Cravalho or something. Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, she's also in the new Mean Girls musical movie. But so yeah, she plays Janice. But they weren't going to come back. They got new voice actors. They made this whole entire like TV show and everything. And now suddenly Disney Plus isn't doing very well, and Disney can't get a box office hit. So what do? They take Moana 2. They shove it together. They take the Moana TV show. They shove it together to make Moana 2. They then run to their original voice cast. They just hired the voice cast and recorded the movie like a month or 2 months ago. Like Moana 2 just has wrapped like voice recording, and they're getting it right now to release this. I believe it's this fall. It's coming out. But there's also one thing, and Ezra, we talked about this a little bit earlier. You kind of mentioned it. Was like Moana looked really beautiful. Now, they had done a lot of that animation already for TV, and it was a bit of a lower budget, so they could spend less money but make more money was their original plan. So, A, will it look as beautiful? But B, the other really strong thing Moana had going for it was the music done by Lin-Manuel Miranda. And because they were going to a TV show with a lower budget, Lin did not do it. And now they have someone, and they just announced who it was who did the music. And I forget who it was off the top of my head, but it was someone where it's like, okay, like maybe there's some potential here, but once again, you're getting like, and you know, we can have the argument if Lin-Manuel Miranda is oversaturated now and too much, etc., till we're blue in the face, but you're having the person with one of the biggest, most successful Tony Award-winning musicals in the last decade versus like anybody else. Like there's obviously going to be a big dip in quality there. And I really truly think that not enough people know about this. And so people are like, Moana 2, it's going to be awesome. And now as it slowly gets closer and closer and more of these things come to light, are people going to see Moana 2 is the big question, number one, because also it's been 8 years. And then number two is like, will it even be good? And will it suffer the same fate of Wish and Elemental, where it just is a box office flop? And then the second point also too, where Disney is making these pivots, is that they're looking at their old properties that were successful and making them and reviving them in some way. Wizards of Waverly Place is coming back on Disney Plus this fall. Ezra, I don't know if you're familiar with Wizards of Waverly Place. It is a Disney TV show that Selena Gomez got her start on. It was a very big show when I was young, and Jamie, I believe you also too.
Yeah.
We're only 2 years apart in age, or 3 years apart in age. So yeah, I believe you were also very familiar with Wizards of Waverly Place. And they have a whole spin-off now. They brought Selena Gomez back for it and everything. They're bringing back the original cast for part of it. So yeah, they're reviving that. They did the same thing with Raven Simone. They took That's So Raven and they made Raven's Home, which I believe just wrapped. Like they just finished that, and that one went for a good number of years. So they're looking to milk their old stuff to make money, and they are relying on that nostalgia factor. But I think, like you also said too, Ezra, people realize that it's the same thing. They're getting wise. So even though they've made these pivots, are they going to work out?
Well, and Joe, like again, this is an area too about Disney that we haven't talked about yet, but you just perfectly brought up about reusing old stuff. What are they doing now, right? They're making live remakes of classic Disney, right? They have like a live adaptation of The Lion King, a live adaptation of
Don't get me
Aladdin,
started
right?
on the live adaptation of The Lion King.
And
Dangerous,
it's
Ezra.
fun. Well, and so again, why are they doing this? Because they're trying to bring the new generation in, and which I think is crap. Because I don't think it's old enough yet to do that. But yeah, it just again, there's just this shift happening, and yeah, I just think the picture I have in my head is like they're all in a board meeting, but there's some sort of like boss in there that's restricting actual creative flow. Like there's some kind of agenda happening here. Like, so for anyone that cares about this, my favorite movie of all time is The Lion King, like the 1994, like original Disney The Lion King. My favorite by all far.
My favorite animated film. Yeah.
Yeah, I bawl my eyes out every single time I see it. It's a mess. So so when they came out with this live adaptation for it, I gotta admit, I was kind of excited because if nothing else, I was like, I hope that the music is really, really, really good. Like that's kind of what I was hoping for. And I also heard at the time that it was going to be basically like frame by frame, having James Earl Jones come back as Mufasa. I was like, okay, this is going to be, in theory, on paper, this is going to be great. And unfortunately, it just and I was surprised, and now I don't know why I was surprised, but I was very disappointed with it. And even just moments that like would be super powerful, in the original were just fall flat. Even audio video synchronization, like it was just bizarre. And they added things to it, which I thought was just like, and again, like an added, oh, we got to modernize this thing, right? And I understand why, I get it. Like, I do think a lot of Disney flicks were very like, you know, didn't always have the greatest of messaging in them, like The Little Mermaid, for example, of that. Like, but anyway, but I just think that again, it just takes away from it. And I think that we can do these remastering or these remakes without having to hit you over the head with a frying pan about like here's the today's messaging. So anyway, so I just think that again, I just feel like there's something happening. There's like this hidden agenda that all this media is getting filtered out through to be something else, like what you said about Moana 2. Because I do think when I look back, like when I think about like the Toy Story series, when I think about even Inside Out, those to me make sense to have sequels because, for example, in Toy Story, as Andy grows up, there would be these phases, these natural phases of like, okay, when I'm young, I play with toys and they mean so much to me. As I get older, maybe they kind of start to fade out. That made sense to me. And I don't know why they came out with Toy Story 4 and now 5's coming out. Again, probably more of what we're talking about here. And same with Inside Out, right? Riley gets older. That makes sense to me. But yeah, Moana 2, why? Right? It ended in such a perfect thing. Like
Moana
even like
1, why?
yeah, well, yeah, right, exactly, right, and yeah. So it just, unfortunately, I guess I said, it just seems to take away from like original thought and ideas, because that's why I also think people really like about some of these bigger successes, even throughout history, even with like the Toy Stories, even with like Inside Out, even Moana, like just like the kind of a fresh new idea, totally different era of life. Anyway, there's my rant about that.
Jamie, did you want to add anything on here?
No. I think I already said my piece.
All right.
On
So
this.
to end off this part of the segment, I'm going to quickly list off, and we're just going to do Disney, not Pixar, but I'm going to list off the last 10 years of what Disney movies have come out. And we're just going to quickly go around and say if we liked that movie or if we didn't like that movie. And let's just kind of see where we're at with the overall quality. Okay.
Or if we've
Right.
even seen the movie.
Or if we've even seen the movie.
Yeah.
That's also true as well. Okay. So in the last 10 years, Disney did not release anything in 2015. So this will be 2014, 16, 18, 19, 21, 22, and 23. So starting off with 2014, Big Hero 6. Loved it.
Loved it.
You loved it.
Zootopia. Loved it.
Loved it.
Liked it.
Moana. Do not like it.
Loved it.
Loved it.
Ralph Breaks the Internet.
Hmm.
Just okay.
I'll go liked it.
Oh, that's the like sequel one, right? I did not see that.
Okay. Frozen 2. Liked it, but not as good as the first Frozen.
This is how loved the music, liked the story.
Okay.
I did not see that.
Didn't see Frozen 2?
Oh, I don't know anything about it.
You know I love the Frozen movies.
I know you do.
I know all the words to all the songs in the first one, Ezra, and I'm quite proud of that.
I didn't really like the first one. I know, controversial take, but
First one's so good. All right. Raya and the Last Dragon. Did not see it.
How low can I go on this one? Did not like it.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Encanto. I really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah. Loved it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it also.
Strange World. Didn't see it.
Didn't see it.
Strange World?
Yeah.
I haven't heard of it. What? What is this? I don't know about this.
So Strange World, it wasn't very well promoted at all. It's a science fantasy. It was their 61st movie. Where's the plot here? The original action adventure journeys deep into uncharted and treacherous land where fantastical creatures await the legendary Clades, a family of explorers whose differences threaten to topple their latest and by far most crucial mission. Like there's not much known. Nobody saw this film. Like it
Interesting.
flopped hard.
Yeah, I've not even heard of that. That's crazy.
And then Wish. I didn't see it, and I have no desire to see it.
Agreed. Did not see it. Have no wish to.
Same here.
Okay. Now there are 4 upcoming animated Disney films announced. 4 of them upcoming announced. So I'm gonna let each of you guess how many you think are original versus a reboot or sequel, and then if you can name any of the 4 projects in development. So Ezra first, how many do you think of these out of these 4 are a reboot or sequel, and how many do you think is an original?
Sorry, of which 4?
Of
Like
the 4
like the
upcoming
future ones?
Disney animated feature films.
Oh.
Not including Pixar, Disney animated feature. 4 films have been announced upcoming.
And how much do I think are like originals as opposed to remakes?
Yes.
Or sequels? I'm gonna guess 1 is original. And
1 is original.
And then okay, because I know that Hercules. I'm gonna say 2 are like kind of remakes, and
This is animated, not a live action. Don't forget, it's only animated.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, sorry. So I'm gonna say 1 is original, and the 3 are sequels.
Okay, Jamie.
So you said it's not including Pixar.
Not including Pixar, not including live action, just Disney animated.
Okay, I also feel like 3 are like sequels. Possibly, I don't think remakes for animated. 3 are sequels of some kind, and 1 is original.
Okay. Do you want to guess what any of the sequels might be?
No, I don't. I don't know.
Ezra, do you have any? We already talked about Moana 2, so we'll give you that. Like we already talked about Moana 2. We know Moana 2 is one of the things.
That's right, and like Frozen 3.
Frozen 3.
Yeah, I know that one's coming out. I'm just trying to think what else has been out there. I thought that they were also doing like almost like another Big Hero 6 film. I thought
They did a Baymax TV show on Disney Plus.
Oh yeah, maybe that's what that is. Yeah, that's all the ones I can.
Okay, so all 4 of them are sequels.
Okay.
Nice.
They haven't announced anything new. They are Moana 2 coming out this year. Following a year after that will be Zootopia 2. A year after that will be Frozen 3, and announced in early production but does not have a release date yet is Frozen 4.
Whoa.
Oh, Frozen 4. Okay.
Frozen 4. Even I'm like, maybe that's not needed, guys. I'll still see it though. For upcoming on Pixar, they have announced Elio, an untitled film, and Toy Story 5. So an original, something we don't know about yet, and a sequel. And then for upcoming on live action, we have the Mufasa prequel, which looks awful. The Snow White live action remake coming out in March. The Moana live action remake coming out in July of 2026. And then to be announced, but we know are in production, are Robin Hood, The Sword in the Stone, Hercules, Lilo and Stitch, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Bambi, and the Aristocats.
Those are all the live action remakes?
Those are all the live action.
That's crazy.
Remakes.
That's a lot.
Yes.
Wow.
It's an insane amount. And we know that Lilo and Stitch is done filming.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I expect we'll see that one a bit sooner rather than later. But yeah, anyways, that's where Disney is at right now. Most of their stuff is recycled, but they have other properties outside of Disney. There's more to Disney than just animation and live action remakes. They also own 2 very large lucrative properties. First one is Star Wars. This fall will mark Disney owning Star Wars for an entire decade, 10 years since they officially acquired Lucasfilm from George Lucas. Now, when they did this, they made a lot of changes to Star Wars pretty quickly off the bat. They erased a lot of extended universe canon. They made a bunch of video games no longer canon. They canceled the best performing Star Wars piece of television and then decided to take the same creative team and have them make a show for a younger audience, which ended up actually getting to its own height. And they immediately put into production 3 sequel films to the original trilogy. From there, we would see these sequel films come out. and we would see them not be well received or mixed received, but still make a lot of money. We would see them also do 2 side stories, Rogue One and Solo. One of those would be universally pretty well accepted, and that would be Rogue One. It would get a prequel series, Andor, and it would also make a lot of money. Where Solo would flop at the box office entirely, have a lot of creative problems, inspire a spin-off TV show that still to this day has not been made, and shoehorn in a character so painful to try to make a sequel that then will have a story point that is never followed up on. After the sequels, they would then try and pivot their direction to streaming shows, which seemed to be off in a good direction, but also having one show that took off to win Emmys of extraordinary heights, and another show that is currently on that is dividing fans like there's no tomorrow. And in terms of animation, they would try to make a very young Disney Junior Star Wars show that did not work, and instead re-steer their animation to go back to that show that they originally canceled and make it one of the biggest things ever on streaming, to then inspire a spin-off show, and now whatever they're doing next, plus a anthology series. That's Star Wars in a little nutshell right there, and we're going to break it down bit by bit now with all those points I talked about and see where they are. Now, the first thing is, let's talk about the sequels. So Disney immediately greenlit 3 movies that went into production. They were Episode 7, The Force Awakens, Episode 8, The Last Jedi, and Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Episode 7 started off with pretty good reception, its biggest complaint being it's just kind of Episode 4 redone. Episode 8 is the most divisive Star Wars film. You have people that hate it. You have people that love it and think that it's exciting and new. You also then have The Rise of Skywalker, which for the most part, people, it wasn't as divisive as Episode 8, but a lot of people were just like, it's meh, and didn't feel satisfied with the conclusion to the Skywalker saga, which is what Disney has called the 9 main Star Wars movies. However, they were all financial successes. Ezra, how do you feel about the Star Wars sequels?
First off, I think you're being really nice about them. So I think The Force Awakens, let's talk about that really quickly. So J.J. Abrams directs it, and he has such a good reputation at this point. Like, so, you know, he helped a lot with like the show. Well, he was like big into Star Trek, and he was involved in like things like Lost and whatnot. And, you know, I think a lot of people felt overall good about him. And I thought it was like, to me, that makes sense to have something like this, because we're really like, there's so many Easter eggs that really connected people to the original, because the original coming out in the 70s, okay, yeah, there's a new generation of people. Star Wars is really taken off with like the Clone Wars and everything like that kind of going on. Like that kind of ish made sense to me. And they introduced it well into the story, right? It's been so long. Luke Skywalker is like a legend, like, but like didn't really know if he existed. Like, so that made sense. I thought the story was really well done, even though, yes, people can call it like basically Episode 4 a remake, but I'm okay with that. I really was, because to me, it felt like the story was on, you know, like, and it really set things up really well while still having respect, right? Because you got Han Solo there, where the heck is Luke, all that kind of stuff. So I thought it was really well done. And then even like the lightsaber fights themselves, you know, I think like the prequels were huge into like, you know, just kind of like really action CGI heavy, and it's really felt like this movie was really trying to bring back some of the roots about like those practical effects more and everything like that. And even the lightsaber fights themselves were like more kind of like brutal, slower, heavy duty things, which I didn't mind. And then they switched directors, which in my biased opinion was strike number 1, because how do you build a trilogy? And again, people would say, well, you know, the original had different directors, and I get that. But like, in terms of like director, but at least you had George Lucas, who was still part of all
They
these
didn't have a
things.
plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was nothing planned out.
And then Rian Johnson comes into play, and, you know, again, I think it speaks to this theme that we talked about before, which was like, we got to modernize it. We got to do this thing. And I can see why Mark Hamill, for anyone that doesn't know, he plays Luke Skywalker in the films, was upset with this movie. And I appreciated him being honest about it. And he was just kind of saying, like, I disagreed with like everything about this movie. But hey, I'm an actor. I have to do what I'm basically told. So there you go. I appreciated. Did I hate the movie? Hate? No. I appreciated this idea that maybe Ray is kind of from no one, that kind of thing. But they definitely did Luke Skywalker bad. Like I didn't mind him grieving about like the Jedi Academy, which by the way they never really talk about, which was a huge letdown. But you know, and just like the darkness kind of thing that kind of hit him, like when he saw Kylo Ren's future, all that kind of stuff. So I didn't mind all that, and there was other sub points in that movie that were seemingly pointless. But then the third movie comes out, and then they bring J.J. Abrams back, and it's kind of like, okay, man, so here's your job. You got to fix everything that happened before. And for anyone, but probably a lot of you don't know who I am. I'm someone who watches a movie at least twice. First time you watch it, I'm just trying to gather everything, and then I watch it a second time to make sure everything happens. I have not watched The Rise of Skywalker twice. I watched it in the movie theater. Yeah, I watched it in the movie theater with my wife, and I'm someone like, and I have no problem saying this. I take movies pretty seriously. I am quiet. I am all this kind of stuff, and if I wasn't so comfortable in my seat, we probably would have left. Like it was just so over the top bad. It was just bizarre, and it really made me upset, and I think it made a lot of people upset because here you have this really special story that has been in the decades through so many people, and it just felt like it got crapped on, which is really, really, really too bad. So anyway, so those are my many thoughts about the sequels. It started off so good, I thought, and I was excited to see where this is going to go, and then it just totally shit the bed. And it was just over the top, and there was even some points that don't even get talked about, and then they're announcing a new one with Ray coming back. So it's like, what? Yeah. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I know, Jamie, you don't have too much to offer on the Star Wars conversation. I think you've only seen like The Mandalorian, and that's it.
Well, I've seen all like the main movies.
Have you seen 7, 8, 9?
Yeah.
Okay, you've
Those
seen
were actually
7, 8, 9.
the
Okay.
first things Star Wars I saw. I saw them
Oh.
before seeing the originals. Yeah.
So it only got better for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about Star Wars a lot on this show. We have a whole episode dedicated to Star Wars with myself, Noah Shepard, and Adam Van Nest. Go check it out if you haven't listened to that already. But yeah, the sequels are mostly bad. I enjoyed Force Awakens. I actually saw it multiple times in the theater. I was a fan of Force Awakens. I was excited for where they were going. The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, Ezra, I've never rewatched. I think The Last Jedi, its biggest problems are Laura Dern's character because she makes no goddamn sense in her actions.
Yep.
And the fact that if you remove the entire Canto Bight, like Finn and Rose B plot, it doesn't change the movie. If your B plot does not affect your A plot, what the fuck are you? This is like sitcom 101 writing. If you can't write a sitcom, Rian Johnson, get out. I don't like Rian Johnson's movies. I don't. I have complained about Glass Onion on this podcast for I think about 20 minutes. Like, it's so lazy, and people praise him like he's a genius. And there's a third Knives Out movie, and the first two were never good to begin with, guys. Weren't good. He makes obvious whodunits, and people think it's genius because of that. Like, it's so dumb. Yeah, not a Rian Johnson fan. Now, however, Disney has though continued to show that they don't really have a plan, because out of these movies, these sequels, they announced, I believe it was 6 different projects. There was a movie by the Game of Thrones guys who made the Game of Thrones movies. There was a trilogy by Rian Johnson. There was a Taika Waititi film. There was a Kevin Feige film. There was Rogue Squadron, which was by Patty Jenkins. And I believe there was one more that I'm just reading off the top of my head. But they announced at least 5 films. No real plan, just kind of given any director that wanted to make a Star Wars film, and nothing's come to light of that. We'll see if anything ever does, but a lot of those projects have been kind of shelved and put on. Now, Disney has tried to make a better plan now, because what they've done is they have made 2 significant hires, which is that Jon Favreau wanted to make a Star Wars TV show, and he needed someone's help to make a Star Wars TV show. Now, Jon Favreau was a part of Star Wars beforehand, he voiced a character named Pre Vizsla in the Clone Wars. Pre Vizsla was a Mandalorian who believed that Mandalore had fallen too far from their roots and needed to go back to the ways of the past. And so he led a terrorist organization that was rebelling against the capital called Death Watch. That's who he plays, just for kind of a quick thing right there. And so Jon Favreau wanted to make a Mandalorian TV show. And he brought on George Lucas's protege, Dave Filoni, who made The Clone Wars, who made Rebels, who has been a big creative force, and as of, I believe, like 6 months ago, was promoted to Chief Creative Officer at Lucasfilm, which is very reassuring for Star Wars fans. But so they've made The Mandalorian, which was a really great hit and a success, and they've also started to use The Mandalorian and those spin-off shows, The Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka, to tell the story between episodes 6 and 7, make things make a bit more sense and kind of bridge the gap, which in fairness is what Dave Filoni did for the prequels. The prequels were also not very well regarded when they came out, but people can appreciate the prequels more now because the jump between episode 2 and 3 is 3 years, but there's such drastic jumps in the characters. Dave Filoni has a 7-season show called The Clone Wars that explains a lot of that and makes it a lot better. Anakin's descent and betrayal has so much more of a punch now than it did just when what made it bigger then was that people just wanted to see Darth Vader. Now, right, like you would see a transition into Darth Vader. There's a whole 3-episode arc called the Mortis arc that really dives into the two sides of the Force and how the Force works. And even though that exists and that is canon, Disney still doesn't seem to fully understand how the Force works. There's this great clip going around right now with Ahmad Best, who was Jar Jar Binks. And then he also plays a Jedi Master now too as well. And I forget his Jedi Master's name. But he did appear in the latest season of The Mandalorian. And Ahmad Best is talking about how George says, that like people often confuse balance between the light side and the dark side. They need to be balanced. Where actually the light side needs balance. The dark side is just outside. It's that chaos. It's that darkness that consumes you and it makes you something else. And that's what throws the light side out of balance. But it's the light side that needs balance. Needs to be balanced. And a lot of people still don't fully understand that, especially Disney, where Disney kind of keeps throwing out these stories that don't really make sense, sort of a thing, or really kind of go with the Force. One of my favorite things that Disney ever did was they wrote in The Force Awakens a line where Han Solo screams at Finn, "That's not how the Force works." Yet for the rest of that sequel trilogy, Disney does not seem to understand how the Force works, and they introduced the idea of Force dyads, which is Rey and Kylo's connection. So it gets really interesting what they're doing, but they finally seem to have a plan with The Mandalorian, and that's working out. And so they then announced 2 movies set during that time period. One by Jon Favreau, which is The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is coming out in, I believe, a year. And they also announced a Dave Filoni movie, which Dave Filoni has said he's going to get to after he finishes with the TV shows, what they're doing, because they're all leading to that movie. And right now, the next TV show in production in that is Ahsoka Season 2. So that's where that is going in that direction. But they also, Ezra, to your point, they announced a prequel film set about the dawn of the Jedi. It's a very interesting concept to kind of get into. And they announced a very far off sequel film with Rey's own Jedi Temple. They're setting up other stories right there. And there was a Film Theory, if everybody here familiar with Film Theory, the spin-off channel from Game Theory, recently did a video on Star Wars and their timelines, and their biggest complaint was that Star Wars never has a plan, and they're focusing on too many different areas. Star Wars animation is focused between episodes 3 and 4, with the Clone Wars ending and the Bad Batch, and now Tales of the Empire and Tales of the Jedi. You've got your live action stuff, which is mainly focused between 6 and 7, but now also before episode 1 with the Acolyte. And your books are only the High Republic. Like they are just mainly focused the High Republic, 3 phases that started back in 2017 and will be wrapping up at the end of this year or beginning of next. They're doing different things in different places, and it's kind of all over the map. There isn't a plan. There isn't an obvious flow there.
Do you want to hear my theory why?
Yes, I actually do.
So my theory, it's actually right in line with what we were talking about before about what Disney Plus is all about. It's a subscription. It's like cable. So I think Marvel's doing the exact same thing. So do you notice how, like, when Marvel all got started before Disney Plus, you could watch these individual movies and they're good on their own, but they tied together. And that was kind of like really cool at the time, because you're like, oh, like there was a link here. Okay. And well, but like the Infinity Stones, for example. And that's not what Star Wars is doing now as well, where they are very much talking about like, okay, well, like like for example, like the Boba Fett. So like, you know, the Mandalorian started and they started bringing these characters in. And now you have to see the Mandalorian to really fully understand the Boba Fett kind of show. And it just seems like there's like this continuous like show after show after show that you have to watch um, to understand everything completely. And they do have these kind of like one-off shows. So for example, Andor, which I, as far as I know, I think they're doing the second season on, and also like Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so like with Obi-Wan Kenobi, for example, I am one of the maybe few that actually really enjoyed the show.
Oh,
I enjoyed, so just to be really clear to everyone here, what I really enjoyed about it was Obi-Wan himself and the struggle and the grief that he has. Because again, in like we know that Darth Vader is alive and that he's Anakin and all this kind of stuff. Obi-Wan wouldn't know that. So I loved how they brought that up. I also think what they're really trying to do with Rogue One as well, and in this show, was really show the ferocity of Darth Vader, because back in the 70s and 80s, they couldn't really do that with at the time and all that kind of stuff. So I think that they were really trying to do that. But these other shows, though, it just seems like you have to watch it to understand the full story. And I think that's what the MCU is doing too. And unfortunately, as a result, either shows get canceled because they didn't do well or whatever. So all these subplots are they can't be concluded. And then people get frustrated. Like the Marvels, for example, it's like there was this big giant thing in the atmosphere or whatever, and it's like, what the heck happened to that thing? And no one seems to be talking about it. So I think Star Wars is kind of doing something similar, where it feels like they have to keep pumping out all this stuff so that people keep subscribing to Disney Plus. And again, I think you sacrifice quality for that.
yeah, I agree with that. I think also too, their biggest issue as well is, and this is where we'll talk about the Acolyte a little bit, is that they're alienating fans at the end of the day. Like, you know, like the Acolyte is a idea that I think is great on paper. I don't want to spoil too much because I don't know for people watching the show, it is still airing. But the Acolyte essentially, it starts off as a Jedi murder mystery. There are two twins involved, and it deals also with a little bit of Dathomirian Night Sister magic as well too. So it's got like some good things, but the main point of it is it's a Sith Acolyte, and is a great idea, great concept. I think it has a very diverse cast, which I think is really, really great as well. There's a bunch of different aliens as well too. What it looks like and what it should be Star Wars. The writing, pacing of the show does not feel like Star Wars. There are forced white transitions throughout the show to make it feel like the prequels, but it doesn't. And overall, it just feels like it's trying to shoehorn in stuff to set up like what would become of Star Wars, but it's kind of missing the point. Like the Jedi don't feel like the Jedi. The Jedi refuse to raise their lightsabers. The Jedi are suddenly worried about the Senate controlling them when we're 100 years out from that. Like there's just so much happening in this show, and the dialogue is not really well written. The only thing I've really seen really well is Manny Jacinto, which, Jamie, I believe you're a Manny Jacinto fan. You were calling Manny Jacinto being a really good actor back in his Good Place days. But he is.
You're talking to me?
Yeah.
I don't know who that is.
He played Jason on The Good Place.
Oh, I only watched half of season 1 of The Good Place, so you must be thinking of someone else.
I could have sworn you talked to me about Manny Jacinto being like a good actor and was like going to do good things. But
anyways,
yeah, but he's fantastic in this show. He plays a very like serious, like intimidating role, and he's absolutely great. Yeah, but it's just like, and you know, it's not listening to fans of kind of like, there are toxic Star Wars fans out there. Star Wars has a very toxic fandom, and not rewarding those people, but there are people out there with genuine complaints, and that genuinely are like, you know, like this show is trying to seem like it's so intelligent, but it isn't, and it really isn't offering anything. And you know, and people are like, you know, that's not what we want to see as Star Wars fans. Like if they want to tell High Republic stories, which is Disney's own era that they've been creating, we're okay with that. What we're not okay with is lazy storytelling.
I agree. Like, I think the potential was awesome. Like, because I think, you know, just like other world building literature out there, like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, all this, like Star Trek, you know, you have this entire universe that you could really speak to, the history and everything like that. And I think that Star Wars has really and like dried up the well about the Luke Skywalker era, right? Like how much more can we have in this time span here? And I think I think a lot of people are just exhausted about how much time in between episode 3 and 4, how much stuff can you really fit in there. So to go back way in history makes a lot of sense. And there's so much literature about it. There's even video games that touch on it too. It's such a cool time that there's tons of freedom to do. And it just seems like, again, I just think about this board meeting where there's just someone in there that says, okay, but you have to connect it to something here. And now it just feels like bad writing. Like, again, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but just I think it was in the last episode too, they're already like, they're hinting that they're talking about Order 66 a little bit here. And it's like, why? Why do we have to do that? And it just feels like there's just hidden agendas really pushing this thing. I don't know. That's again, will I ever know that if that's true or not? No, but like it just feels that way, I find.
Amy, do you want to add anything about Star Wars before we talk about Marvel?
No, I'm not really a Star Wars person.
All right. We've talked about Marvel a lot on this podcast as well. We all know how I feel about Endgame, so we don't need to rehash it. But let's just kind of look beyond that right there. Phase 4 was pretty much a flop. I think it started off strong with WandaVision. I think WandaVision was a great show. Thought it was a nice, cool, creative idea. Really enjoyed that. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it immediately started to fall off for me. The dip in quality was there, pretty apparent. However, I don't completely fault Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They had to reshoot more than half of their show because their original premise was about a pandemic, and then the pandemic happened. So they had to change that entirely. And there are still little references in the background of shots to that original storyline that they tried to shoot around. So I don't completely fault The Falcon and the Winter Soldier for its failure. But what I do fault are shows like Moon Knight that are sloppily edited, poorly written, and not at all interesting. I fault What If, which I think is just bland and not at all exciting or innovative, like people try to pretend that it is. I fault movies like The Eternals, which is one of the worst movies I've seen in the last few years. I've read my review on this podcast multiple times out loud. It is scathing. I hate The Eternals. Shang-Chi was okay, but still nothing really out there. The third act is still messy. Marvel has a third act problem like we've talked about before. Their main problem, I think, was that, and they seem to, of course, corrected this, Ezra, like you kind of said, was that they were just throwing everything out there. There was so much. There was Marvel absolutely everywhere. And people were already fatigued after Endgame. People were tired, and now they're trying to do something new, but they're not really doing something new. They're just kind of doing their exact same thing over and over again. And people were wise to it. I saw Spider-Man No Way Home in theaters. And as a Spider-Man fan, I had a lot of fun, and as someone who when I was really young, I grew up watching the Tobey Maguire movies. I watched the Andrew Garfield movies, seeing them all together that was great. That was fun and everything. I think Charlie Cox was great as Daredevil. To see him back as Matt Murdock, great right there. But then you go back and you watch it afterwards, so you watch that first time, you absorb it, and you enjoy it. You have that nostalgia. And I still think it's a good Spider-Man movie. I don't think it's a bad Spider-Man movie. But if anybody's rewatched it over without being in a theater, there are literally moments where they have actors pause for audience applause. They built in audience applause breaks into their movie, which is so weird. But that's also Marvel, relying on their fanfare that they're building up and everything. And that just isn't there. And then you've also got things that were really lazy, like She-Hulk. I think the only She-Hulk was very meh. The Daredevil part was kind of fun. But that whole show, I think, gets blown away and wrecked by just making it a huge fourth wall joke at the very end and using that to wrap up all of your plot points. I think that was so stupid and so dumb and just really dropping the ball. Miss Marvel was just okay, but then the Marvels came and it was very lackluster. I think the phases are a mess. I think people know that they want something more intelligent and more, because people still want superhero movies. The Batman was such a critical success, but it did new things. It relied on practical effects, not just CGI. And it was exciting and told a good story that was true to its characters that people want to see. Marvel's not doing that. Now, Deadpool and Wolverine is coming out, and they just dropped the trailer for the fourth Captain America movie. The best Captain America movie, and the best MCU movie that we've talked about on this podcast, Jamie, I know you and I agree with this, is The Winter Soldier. It's really, really good. It's a political thriller that makes sense and is awesome. And it looks like Captain America 4 is trying to do that. But at the same time, you've done that already. So yeah, you might be trying to go back to what worked. You've done it already. And then you've got Deadpool and Wolverine, which, looks like fun. I'm actually kind of looking forward to it a little bit. I'm excited to see what they're going to do with that. personally as a comic book fan. But I also look at it and I'm like, there's a good chance this is just the same thing rehashed over. Or what I think is worse is that it's Deadpool rehashed over, but Disney toned down, which is even worse.
So my understanding, I don't disagree, Joe. The only thing I'll chew on a little bit more here is the Deadpool thing. I think Deadpool has always, since its existence with Ryan Reynolds taking the lead, it has broken all the rules, right? It's R-rated. It just holds no bars, and I think people really loved it. And I think there was a lot of worry when Disney took over, and they said very clearly, like, they basically still have all this stuff. And it's kind of funny because even in the trailer, Ryan Reynolds even pokes fun of Disney, right? Like saying like, oh, there's certain things we can't talk about with like cocaine or whatever it was. So I do think there is a lot of pressure on Deadpool and Wolverine. I will say I am optimistic about it because I really respect Ryan Reynolds. I really respect Hugh Jackman. I don't think, because of just who they are, I think that they wouldn't do this if they didn't have all the control. I really do. I think that would have been a requirement, and I think that they have this formula that Deadpool has always had seems to really bring in a lot of money. So I think it would be very foolish if Disney tried to put some filters around it, and I don't think that they are. But obviously, we'll have to wait and see. And again, what's somewhat smart is that they're introducing other things in the MCU, like the TVA whole time issue into the Deadpool world. But to go off your point, though, like with WandaVision, I agree. I thought it was excellent. And again, what a great depiction. And again, always bringing in the mental health side of things. What a great depiction of grief, right? Like that's really the essence of the show is Wanda's grief and the manipulation of I forget, it's not Shield, I guess. I don't know who it is. That like kind of overtake Vision's body. But a big issue I think is also happening here is that it takes so long to get other things in place. So actually Disney has their big expo, I think it's on Monday. And Disney, yeah, that's right. And so they're probably going to reveal all these things again. And the problem with doing that is that there's inevitably delays to things. And so, for example, WandaVision came out, in 2019, I think, or something like that. And
2020, it was released at the height of the pandemic, right at the beginning of 2020.
Lovely. Nice. And we're still waiting for a Vision show, right? So the Agatha,
it's called Vision Quest, which is really funny to me. Sorry, I just had to put that in there. It's called Vision Quest. I think that's a silly name.
I know. So I think, again, I just think that they're just throwing things in here because, and again, I think having Disney Plus doesn't help because I think that there's this pressure of keep throwing things at viewers to keep them subscribed or get new subscribers in there, but they're sacrificing all this stuff. And again, like what's nice about Spider-Man, for example, is that it stands well on its own. And I think that was something that really excited a lot of people. Yes, bringing in Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield helped with that too, but it seems like it really just stood well on its own, and it didn't need like it didn't need, I don't know, like Black Panther or anything like that to propel it. Because I think Far From Home really used Endgame to propel it forward, like the grief of Tony Stark. But the way it just kind of ended, Far From Home, like where Peter Parker's identity gets revealed, it right away made this movie happen. And it just made logical sense. Oh, go to Doctor Strange and try to reverse things, blah, blah, all this kind of stuff. So I didn't mind that. And I think a lot of people really responded well to it. And I think Sony, I don't know how much control they really had, but when I think about all the other Disney stuff going on, this is one that had Sony connected to it. I wonder if Sony did some things that really made sure that the content was good. I have no idea, but
if you've seen a Sony Spider-Verse movie that isn't animated, Sony doesn't have much creative control.
Yeah, fair enough. By the way, Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, we love those movies. They're amazing.
Those are good. Those are very good movies. I'm excited for Beyond. Jamie, do you want to weigh in on Phase 4?
Yeah, I think a big part of the issue is they just started making too many things. And as Ezra said like a while ago with Spider-Man, is that Marvel before had a good way of like building up to something without having to have watched everything. But there was still time to watch everything, and it made it very satisfying to see all these characters come together and the overlaps. And I remember I would be like excited for each Marvel movie, and I looked at what was coming, and I would be like, oh my God, in 3 years, I can't wait for this movie. But now it's like there's so much coming out between the TV shows and movies, and none of them are really the same quality as before. Like, I guess they've chosen quantity over quality, that you can't keep up. So it doesn't give you time to build up the excitement and the characters that are introduced as well, because all of the big names from the comics have already been done. So it's not really things that people have characters that people are like excited to see from the comics, at least except for like real comic nerds, perhaps like yourself, Joe. You'll be like, oh no way, they're doing Stiltman or whatever. But
For
you know,
context, I believe you have a Stiltman comic, don't you?
I have like a Daredevil comic with
Mhm.
Stiltman, and I have it like in the slab.
Yeah.
That's anyways.
You,
um so they like the movies aren't coming out and don't have the draw. The movies that are coming out don't have that draw of having the popular characters. They're not giving time to build up anticipation for people to be like, oh, I want to look into this. Like, let me watch a YouTube video. Let's see what's happening. Because it's like, oh, it's already out by the time you hear about it. It's already like straight to streaming, TV show, binge it so then you can understand this movie that comes out in a few months. And I don't know. I feel like it's just way too much. You can't keep up with it. And it doesn't have that same, like, I don't know, the same something that it had back when.
I'd agree with you, Jamie. And yeah, back in the day, like when I was growing up, I thought movies were always seen as higher quality than TV shows. You know, TV shows just kind of brought in like lower camera quality and all that just kind of stuff. And it just seems like and then as has gone on, it seems like TV has really kind of gone up, right? When you have these mini series like Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones obviously came out. Um, so yeah, like when the first Iron Man movie came out, like that was just amazing. I think Robert Downey Jr. played a big role with that. And so when that era ended with Endgame, when you basically not get rid of, but like when two of your main characters, Steve Rogers and Tony Stark, when they are done, I think it really showed how much of the MCU was on their shoulders.
Mhm.
And I get that you like again, there's just so much material. Like I get that we want maybe pass that on to other things. I get that. I agree with you though. I think it was just done kind of poorly because I don't think anyone believed it. It's why for me, I really like the show Loki. And I
Mhm.
did really like WandaVision because that made natural sense because these were kind of things that came out of Endgame. But unfortunately, like with these TV shows, especially Loki that has 2 seasons, and it took however long to get that going. They pumped out like at least what like 6 series and movies and stuff like that. Like, and it just didn't connect. And I think that is the biggest question I've heard just all over social media, which is where are we going? Because at least in the MCU, when it all got started with Iron Man, first it came up to being about okay, building the Avengers, right? And then the first Avengers movie comes out, and then they really started to tease out about like the Infinity Stones. And I really thought this was actually really well done. I thought like, okay, now the government's getting involved with Captain America Civil War. So again, all these things kind of make sense and blah blah whatever. But yeah, I just feel like in this whole like again like White Knight or whatever, like what was that even for? Um or yeah, like yeah, Shang-Chi, like all these kind of things, it's like, what was the point? Because I think that these things would be received better if there was actually a point to them. And because you don't know what they are, and it's been X number of months and years, I think people are just really losing faith in like tying this all together because yeah, and also it just seems to be all over the place to like I think of like the latest Black Widow movie, right? Like or like the only one that they really did. But the whole point of that movie was really to introduce the other character that would eventually be in the Hawkeye show. So like again, was it necessary? Probably not. And again, I think quality has really gone down, not just from a story standpoint, but even CGI.
Mhm.
and stuff like that too. So yeah, basically, I don't know. I think they kind of got money hungry or something like that happened, and I don't know. I think people sounds maybe bad. I don't know, but like I think people are smarter than maybe what Disney thought, and that people want the quality over the quantity, and now we're just exhausted from it all. So
Yeah.
that's Ezra's own take on it all.
All right. Let's look now at Disney and beyond to kind of wrap up here, guys. We've talked about Disney animation. We talked a little bit about their live action. We've talked about Star Wars. Talked about Marvel. Where should they go next, and how should they fix their problems? Like, what are our takes, and what do we think they need to do? Of course, we're not all like we're not corporate people. We don't know that, but it sounds like as people kind of experiencing everything happening, we have a bit of a better understanding of where Disney's going wrong as their consumer. So, Jamie, I'll start with you. Where do you think Disney should go next, and how do you think they should do to improve any of their properties?
Yeah, I don't think this will provide them any sort of financial gain right away, but I think in the long run it will help them and people will appreciate it and it will strengthen them, but they just need to take more risks and look into outsourcing more creative people and treating their creative talent better so they can get more interesting ideas and people that aren't just like, okay, well this will increase our profits tenfold right now because people will buy all of this merchandise again. They need to like think about what made people love the original movies so much and not necessarily think, okay, well, let's take this from that movie, let's take this from that movie, but rather see, like, oh, well, this challenged this. We changed everything up. All the movies that did well were because they were like new or there was something interesting or we had a new creative team, that there was just a unique idea in there rather than just trying to take from all of their previous movies. So I think like for Disney itself, it should try to create new franchises or even just new characters and introduce something new and original and value creativity more. And I even think for like Marvel and Star Wars, I think for those like established huge franchises, I think they should just give it space. Like do less and focus on more quality and just get a treat their creatives better and listen to what fans are saying. If they're saying, we want more quality, we want it to respect the previous canon, and I don't know. Yeah, I feel like they should just give it more space.
Ezra?
I'd agree. Like you know, I I think of like it just seems like money hungry. Like I feel like, so I'm a huge Harry Potter fan and I really like the books. I'm not a fan of the movies. But then they introduced like Newt Scamander, like Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and they tried to do this 5 movie thing, and it fell flat on its face. And as far as I know, it's
Awful.
canceled now.
Yep.
Yeah, and so like why? And it's something that I always kind of go into media and I'm always kind of asking that question of like, okay, why? Why do this? And I feel like kind of going off of what Jamie was talking about, I do think, and I don't know yet if it's a good or bad thing, but I think that there is just so much, I think fans have a louder voice than they ever did. And I actually sometimes wonder if that's maybe getting in the way of creative idea because I do think that there is fear, there's all this kind of stuff perhaps of like, okay, it has to be done this certain way, or fans like, and I think of it from even like a popularity standpoint because even like big actors are now getting into Disney films and they seem to advertise that more and more and more. And it's just like maybe we don't need that. Maybe we can just have just a nice solid story and getting rid of the whole like Disney specifically, like with their own animation films. Can we just get rid of the formula, right? Like, why does there always need to be some cute little, sidekick that adds nothing to the story, right? Other than, and it's so obvious that it's just for merchandise, so you can sell it at Walmart or whatever for a kid. But like, it's just so part of the equation, and I think people just see it over and over and over again. Um, Again, for me, what I really loved about the originals of like, and this isn't even that original because I'm talking about more of the 90s here, but like, just having like kind of stories with like exaggerated villains like the Gastons of the world or Jafars or where all that kind of stuff. Because I do think that the reason why Thanos, for example, is such a great villain, that a lot of people liked in Infinity War, is that he makes sense. Don't necessarily agree with his take, but I see why he thinks the way he does or sees what he does. And I think that people can, like, the more relatable that people can make of it, I think the better. And so I just think that Disney just needs to just stop and just take a breath and get back to, like, what made this thing great in the first place. Was it about how much content we're pushing? I don't think so. I think it was about quality. I think it was about, okay, we don't need to pump something out every year. We can do something longer. It even reminds me, and like for any video gamers out there, it reminds me of like Assassin's Creed, like this whole series that they kept pumping out these games every year, or Call of Duty every year. And people are like, their sales are just going down because it's just the same thing with updated graphics. And I think people just want just better quality. I think that's it. Like, I don't think you need to stop, obviously, with like making Captain America 4, for example. It's just, could we have done this better so that it's not just another Marvel thing? Because it makes sense to have a Captain America 4 based on, okay, Steve Rogers gives the shield to Sam. That's cool. I get it. I see where we're going. But then how do we build this up? And that's why I didn't mind where the show was going. Kind of made sense. You're right, Joe. They had to switch it up. But I just think that Disney just needs to just slow it down. And again, I hope, and I think that, Disney Plus is great. I just also kind of wonder if it kind of took away from things, because I think that it took away from the like amount of time that, like, we can't just do one a year, one every 2 years. Now we need to do it so quick. And I think that has now taken precedence over building a really great story. So that's my take on it. It's just, it's okay to be slow and great. Because I think that's what led to a lot of success in earlier things. And also, I think
we'll wait for things.
Yeah,
like, look at animation.
I agree.
Across the Spider-Verse, like, was great. People were so excited for Beyond, but people would rather wait for Beyond than Lord and Miller rush it.
That's right. And people will rewatch stuff. You know how many people right before Endgame, even though they split between two movies, so many people watched like the 22 movies again, just to build up. Like, people I think like to go back and watch things. I don't think that you need to just pump it out. People will do it themselves, I think, is the point. And yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, I think also too, like, you can, like, just to go back to people will wait for things, like, even video games, like, it's longer. Like, Jamie and I have to be two of the most patient people in the world. Our favorite video game is Skyrim, and we're waiting for Elder Scrolls 6 still to this day.
Oh yeah.
And it has been 13 years since that game came out, and it has been, I think, 6 years since the teaser, and we're still 6 more years out from ever getting the game. Like,
that's right.
But people will wait for things. So I agree with you there that, take your time more with that. I think that's a great piece of advice. I will skip over your Thanos comments because we don't have time to fight about Thanos. But I love Thanos, Ezra. I do, but I have issues with MCU Thanos. But just to kind of wrap up on my thoughts on all of this, I think when it comes to Disney, they need to throw out everything live action. They need to stop just recycling the same movies over. They're not working. They're not good. Lion King was awful. I hope nobody sees Mufasa. I hope that flops. I hope it makes them reevaluate what they're doing there. With animation, I'm sure they're going to add a few more original ideas, but they've got to, like Jamie said, take risks. They've got to try and be different with their style. They've got to make something that people actually want to see. Shrek 5 is coming out now in 2 years. And if people really want that, but they changed the animation stuff for Puss in Boots, I assume they'll probably do something similar or maybe even different for Shrek 5. And so that has to kind of, you need to have that there. Otherwise, what's the point of a fifth? What is the point of a fifth Shrek? We could get into that too.
Because Shrek's awesome. That's why. I don't know.
When it comes to Star Wars, I think Kathleen Kennedy needs to go. I think she doesn't know what she's doing as someone in a creative position. She was a great producer on a bunch of Lucas stuff in the 80s, and she worked with Spielberg. She's a great producer. But when it comes to being that chief person in charge of things, I don't think she knows what she's doing. I think she's in over her head, and I think that's been proven time and time again. And I think Star Wars would be smarter to put more stock in their animation. It is cheaper for them to make. It is more well received and more successful overall. And we know that not enough of it comes out because it takes time to do animation. So I think putting more in animation is a good idea for them. And with Marvel, yeah, it's quality over quantity, which it seems that's the way they're pivoting, but it's also not doing the same things over and over and over again. I have high hopes for what DC is doing with James Gunn, because James Gunn has a very absurd style and seems to kind of recognize these things. I think James Gunn has also too assembled a team to work on these things on different parts of the project and kind of assembled the pipeline, where Marvel, everything goes through Feige. And I think Feige needs to have like a little team of his own to kind of handle things and more like day-to-day decisions and things like that. He can focus on that big picture, but Marvel needs to have more of an established pipeline. Yeah, and those are my thoughts right there. Boom. All righty. Well, Ezra, that's our show. So I think we can all universally agree Disney's a mess. They need to change, and none of us want to see Mufasa.
Yeah.
Again, why? Right? Why have this? Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. And yeah, something's gone lost, unfortunately.
Alrighty. Well, Ezra, as is with tradition with all of our episodes, we do like to ask our guest one question, and we didn't ask it to you at the top of the show, which was my fault, but I'm going to ask it to you right now. Ezra, what is your favorite movie of all time?
Yeah, so my favorite movie, depending on the genre that you talk to me, like that you asked me, but basically, if I had to sum it all up, it's The Lion King.
Lion King.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so like again, for me, I look at all these different quadrants, and like, I feel like it's one of those movies, and there's I would argue, and sorry if I offend anyone, but like I think Lord of the Rings is like this. I think the first Matrix movie is like this. I think The Dark Knight's kind of like this, perhaps, but like it's this great combination of, music and story and animation, and I just think it does such a good job. Like when I watch The Lion King, and the things around it, like Aladdin and like Pocahontas and stuff like that. Like when you watch The Lion King, it's like, okay, this is deeper. Like I think that there is a reason why they have a Broadway show of The Lion King. Like I just think that for a lot of people, it just hits them so much harder, and they can't always articulate why. But it's such a great story, one that's quite serious and dark, but also like just so many great themes. And as I said, I really think they went hard on this movie, right? Like that introduction before anything else begins, like that whole circle of life thing is like iconic. So yeah, I feel like that was a movie that just really, really truly is a masterpiece in animation and story and music. So there you go.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. I really love The Lion King. I think it's really, really great. I have to ask though, what do you think is the best movie ever made? Because like, my favorite movie of all time is The Breakfast Club. I love The Breakfast Club. But like there's so many movies where I'm like, yeah, that's a better movie than The Breakfast Club. Like I put like The Godfather and Shawshank, like those are pretty universally agreed upon as like the best movies made in film. Like, do you agree with something like that? Or do you have like an outlandish take?
I don't disagree per se with that. For me personally, talking about that kind of combination of all these ingredients together, I do think that the Lord of the Rings series, and I say in this series, we could break it down like Return of the King or the Fellowship of the Ring. I think are definitely top tier. Two Towers like is still incredible. I just think that Return of the King or whatever is better. And I know that the movies are missing book materials and all that kind of stuff, so I'm sure people have trouble with that. But I just think, yeah, like those movies, I just think again are such a great combination of story with like action and music, especially. It's just that kind of next level. And I think, yeah, Shawshank is something similar with the story and the acting and everything. And yeah, but again, for me, I also think that the first Matrix movie is just especially at the time, fantastic story, imagery, just themes throughout. Obviously, the action, pretty cool. So yeah, lots of good stuff out there in the world, and that's why I think for a lot of people, especially myself, I think it's why when we talk about things like Disney and this Marvel crap, it's like it almost like hurts the soul because it could be awesome, right? Like as you said, like like the Winter Soldier like was amazing, right? And all that kind of stuff. And so it's like, okay, what happened? What happened? And I think that that's why, even with Star Wars, I think that that's why fans get so upset, because they just care so much about it. Yes, people can go too far, and we live in this world right now of, like, free speech, and people are pretty nasty about things. That's not okay. But I think it just shows people care. People care. So yeah, I hope that this quality will continue to go as time goes on. Get more and more original movies coming out. Same thing with Marvel and stuff like that. Because I also, by the way, I know we're talking about Disney a lot, Marvel and whatnot, but one could even argue that just movies in general, like box office movies, have really changed over the past 10 years. I'm sure that's a whole separate podcast, but I'm sure that this is I think it's a wider issue going on.
Well, Ezra, thank you for being here and joining us today. We
very
appreciate your time. Jamie, we appreciate your time too, because I told you we'd do this in about an hour and 20, and it's been almost 2.
That's okay.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to 21st Century Cinema. As I mentioned, TFCC, we're on a semi-hiatus right now, just while we deal with our time zone drama, but that's all good. We'll be back to regularly scheduled episodes in no time, but until then, you'll have a few more bonus episodes coming your way. Also, I want to shout out, the show turned 5 years old, and we weren't here to celebrate it, Jamie,
That's
but
crazy.
our little podcast is 5 years old. As we mentioned before, we are working on some exciting new things for when we do return properly. In terms of a website, I'm building a website. We're going to have the Shut Up Joe merch be revamped a little bit with a bunch of more things, and just some more exciting updates that we're working on behind the scenes. So excited for that. Ezra, is there anything that you want to plug? Anything you want people to find you anywhere? Anything you want to shout out while we have you?
No, other than, like, as I said, like, as Joe said, like, I'm a owner and a therapist at Stone Style Counseling and Wellness. If any of you are going back to our Inside Out conversation, if any of you are struggling with anything like that, please, again, seek any help that you can. There's tons of crisis lines out there, phone numbers, or there's lots of in-person mental health places. But as I said, it's okay, which is exactly what Inside Out talks about. It's okay not to be okay. And yeah, so again, if you need any help, there's lots of help out there, and reach out. It's okay.
Very sweet. Thank you, Ezra. I also want to thank you for being our first guest to not say "Shut Up, Joe." It means a lot. We're very appreciative of that on one side of this podcast over here. Jamie, where can people find you? What's Blossom up to these days? Tell us.
Well, I guess since the last episode, quite a lot has happened.
Mm-hmm.
But more recently, sorry?
I was going to say, you guys dropped like an EP.
Yeah, we had an EP that was dropped last fall, I don't know. It did pretty well. But more recently, we had a single drop, which is really exciting. And we'll probably have new music by the fall this year, perhaps another EP soon. But with this last single, it's indicative of our new direction, kind of like math rocky, like, I don't know. It's pretty cool, but we had a video go along with that as well. It was called And Run. It's available on, I don't know, all streaming platforms. Unfortunately, the video was not casualty free, but maybe that's a story for another time. Yeah. Rip Greg the mouse. Anyways.
Oh yes, I remember. I heard about this.
Yeah.
Check out Blossom. If anybody's looking for Blossom, you can find it hyperlinked below in our descriptions, socials, and their music. If you're looking to get in contact with Joe, because why wouldn't you be? I'm on Instagram at the one and only JDV with underscores in between each one. Ezra, your wife, follows me actually.
Good. So, like, you got one person. That's good. It's a good start.
I have like 300 followers. Okay.
Ooh, nice.
You can also find me on. Sorry, go ahead, Ezra.
I'm secretly just jealous because I don't think I even have Instagram. So there you go.
You can find me on Twitter at the one and only JDV. I'm also on Letterboxd, where I've been posting more of my movie reviews. Also at the one and only JDV. It's always the one and only JDV. That's where you'll find me. And okay, it's been 14 months. Let's see if I can still do it. If you want to reach out to the podcast, you can follow us. We are on Facebook. So we're on Instagram at 21st Century Cinema. We're on Twitter/X at TFCC Podcast. You can search either of those on Facebook to find the page. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/TFCC. If you're looking to support the show in any way, right now it's just Noah. Nobody's really, we don't support the Patreon right now. We're doing quarterly episodes. Do the Patreon when we're back. But if you're looking to support the show in another way, we have merch. Our merch is linked down below, tpublic.com/21st Century Cinema. It will be changing its home soon. For those complaining about merch prices, that is part of our revamp. We are going to be getting better merch for you guys with prices. But if you're looking to support the show, T Public does do a bunch of sales. We do get a piece of that. And you can also get your Shut Up Joe merch. It is our best-selling merch. It is close to reaching 200 units sold. I don't know why.
That's
I don't
crazy.
know
200?
why. All of our other merch has done somewhere between 5 to, I want to say, like 30 units, you know? And we have a pretty like good selection of items on there. So we've sold some merch. But Shut Up Joe continues to sell so much. And yeah, so if you're looking to get your Shut Up Joe merch, I've got a friend of mine who wears their sweater and has pins and stickers out in public. I've got a friend who has the mug and posts about it on Facebook. So yeah, if you're looking, my whole family did a Christmas card where everyone was wearing Shut Up Joe shirts. So yeah, if you're looking for Shut Up Joe, you can get that down below as well. Want to shout out you once again, Ezra, for being here today. Thank you guys so much. We're going to be back in the fall. It's going to be me, Noah, and a guest doing a pretty cool episode that I'm excited about, but I also can't tease too much because we're still kind of going back and forth on the premise of. And of course, Jamie, we look forward to, of course, if you decide to join that episode, if you're able to, or of course, just having you on again in the future.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, for sticking with us, for coming back after 14 months. We appreciate it. Even though a lot of you were still listening to our last episode, it's our most listened to episode. So
wow.
Yeah. Yeah, our Blockbusters episode with Dan Nadelko is currently our most listened to episode, which was kind of crazy. But yeah, we'll see you guys all there. Once again, remember to stream 20% Your Cinema wherever you get your podcast. Stream Blossom's music. And as Ezra said, just to echo, if you are in need of help, it is okay to not be okay and to seek help. You guys so much, and we'll see you next time.